So today's video is going to be talking about leadership isn't a burnout problem. It's not a time problem. It's a state problem. And so one of the things that I find is that time cannot be managed. You get the same amount of time as everybody else. What can be managed is energy and activities. Now, most leaders will understand activities in terms of doing, as much as possible in a day. And oftentimes that leads to burnout. Why? Because they redline. They have a badge of honor. They assume always, traditionally, that they have to outperform other people to get results. And while they hold on to that, that becomes their universal truth. And we all adapt to what we think is true, whether it's good for us or not. And for most people, it isn't true because their body gives them feedback. Now, that's pretty much what I want to talk about today. There's so many people that push themselves and they don't listen to their body. So, I was doing a podcast earlier, and one of the things I was explaining is that intrinsically, animals, they don't have a book, they don't have a guide, but they learn to listen to their instincts. The feedback they get is from their body. And they can communicate so well with their body because they don't have distraction. So many leaders are outputting without actually listening. They're so focused on the outcome. They don't focus on the journey. And they think that's a good thing. And it is for the business, but it's not for the body. And so you sacrifice yourself on the altar of success to get the result. And then ultimately, once you get that result, you move on to another result. And so you're always in this quest. And so what happens is your nervous system normalizes this buzz, this oxytocin, this dopamine hit to constantly accelerate for growth. And you justify it by saying, well, it's got me this far so far. And so, as another saying goes, what got you here won't get you there. And so most people think that means upgrading the effort with regards to what we're talking about. But really, it's the thing that creates the disconnect, because there's so much static, there's so much noise, because you're so fixated and focused on delivering and creating outcomes and seeking the next outcome, that becomes your normal default. You think from how you feel. And this is universally true for everyone. Your mind's primary vehicle of expression is the nervous system. No one says, I think sad. They say, I feel sad. So the feeling comes from the nervous system first. But most people worship the mind and the intellect, and they disregard the body. And so therefore they can keep outputting beyond what is comfortable or, what is really normal. And so it's really important to, first of all, just understand that. And so most people's pain, especially with business leaders, is coming from them outputting too much. And then as their company grows, they realize they can't maintain the energy without some form of sacrifice. And so one of the things, I also say to my clients is you can do this, but at what cost? Especially the way you're doing it, which is just outputting more and more and more. Your body, okay, let's break this down. So what happens is, let's say you consume 2,500 calories a day. Right. That's split between two. I'm going to make it really simple here. It's really split between these two things, the muscles and then the organs. The organs are more important than the muscles. And the reason why is, if somebody cut your arm off, would you survive? Yes, if you don't bleed out. But let them take your heart, or let them take your liver or your kidneys. Most likely won't survive. Those are more important when it comes to the hierarchy of survival reflexes, such as what you see behind me, the hierarchy of survival reflexes, the totem pole there. So your body uses up 35% or so of your energy to digest food. That's the organs, okay? And then that energy can then go to the muscles, because as the muscles move, they need energy. The more you think, the more you problem solve. Use about 25 to 30, 40% of your energy just to process information. Now think about every time you've had an exam in school. let's say it's 2-3 hours, aren't you wiped out after that? It just shows you the amount of energy that goes into processing. So with all of that being said, you have a certain capacity for energy every single day, a finite amount of energy. Now, business leaders typically push way past that to get a result and then wonder why they're so burnt out, because they keep doing it without allowing the body a chance to actually recover. And one of the reasons why is because most business leaders and most people in general are operating from a dysregulated system. And you've probably heard this term because now it's become a buzzword about the nervous system and dysregulation. But what does that mean? Okay, so we have homeostasis and then we have allostasis. Homeostasis means the state of equilibrium or balance. Allostasis means a departure from balance. And so with that, our goal is to only allow ourselves to work within the parameters of homeostasis. And if you can do that, then you are in regulation. One of the ways we do that is we learn to listen to our bodies. When we feel tired, we rest, rather than the business mindset, which is push through, push harder, outperform the pack. That mindset burns the body out because it's not in alignment with what you can do day to day. And if you're a business leader, listen to this, you might think, well, if I slow down, other people will overtake me. No, there's another way. And one of the ways you do that is actually what I'm going to talk about now, which is understanding the brainwave states, knowing what state you need to operate in more often to then allow yourself to be far more productive, to create faster results in less time with less stress. Now, if that's something that's interesting for you, okay, this will be really helpful for you to learn. So there are 7 brainwave states. I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm going to talk about the ones that are really relevant for this conversation. So the first one is delta. Delta is 0.5 hertz to about 3 to 4 hertz. Now what that basically means is how fast your brain is oscillating per second. So 0.5 to about 3 is quite slow. And that's the state you need to be in, delta, to allow you to go into deep, restful sleep. Because your mind is moving slower, you feel more relaxed, you feel more calm, easier to sleep. And outside of that, in the normal day-to-day, we need to move into beta, which is 13 to 30 hertz, which is a lot faster, so you can output. And then the part that most people miss is alpha brainwave state, which is 8 to 12. Been proven by heart math, and when it comes to biological oscillation, which is the balance of 3 systems in the body, which is the heart, the brain, and the digestive peristaltic wave, that 8 to 12 is optimal. So, so when you think about this, 8 to 12 is the optimal rate for our brains to operate in. That is the state of receptivity, relaxation, calm, and intuition and insights. So the way I structure this, especially when I'm working with leaders, is when we look at this from an energetic operating system, intentional beta rather than I'm always in beta, I'm always 100 miles an hour. Intentional beta, which means you decide that for the next 2 hours, I'm going to output. And therefore, you are in the beta brainwave state, working really high level. But then every 2 hours, for 5 minutes, you allow yourself to go into alpha. And that allows you to go into a physiological reset. The reason why it's important to go into physiological reset is because the brain operates better because you are in a calm state, and thus you can access intuition through the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And the more you can access that, the more you can create solutions. If you're really stressed and you live in beta, it's harder for you to access intuition because you need to be in a calmer state to be able to be in parasympathetic rest recovery alpha, to then feel calm enough to entrain information into the body in a receptive way to problem solve. So if you imagine or remember people like Tiger Woods, the best golfer in the world at the time, he went through a marital challenge. So therefore he was mentally quite stressed, and for maybe 3 or 4 years he couldn't get back to his level. That's an example of someone who's constantly in beta, stressed out, can't be creative and flow. So, here you realize that going into the alpha, being in more calm every 2 hours in this example of productivity, allows you to go through this physiological reset. So therefore you can problem solve. And the more you can problem solve, the faster you can solve the problem. The faster you can solve the problem, the faster you can move on to the next challenge or opportunity. That's the way we need to be as business leaders. Going into beta to execute, going into alpha to recover. And if you were to do that every 2 hours, spending 3 to 5 minutes going into alpha, your productivity would go up so high, and your recovery, your sleep would improve, because alpha is the state at which you can access delta and access beta. It's the point between the two. So remember I gave you an example of delta being 0.5 to 3. What's close to that is alpha at 8. What's further away from that is beta, which starts at 13. And so you may now have a question of, how do I get into alpha? Okay, so some of the ways we can do this is journaling. Journaling is really easy. You just write. There's no spiritual component to it. So it's an easy access point. Just get yourself a journal and just start writing. What do I write? Just write down what your thoughts are, what your challenges are, what your fears are, all of the things that you're trying to avoid, because the more you avoid them, the more it builds up in your body, because the body keeps the score. You've heard about this. This is a very famous term. It's even instrumental in a book called The Body Keeps the Score. No one ever says the mind holds the score, because it doesn't. The mind holds the memory. The body keeps the score. It holds the trauma. So when you journal, you're extracting what's held in your body onto paper. So that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is to do some form of breath work. You've heard about breath work, I'm sure. And that allows you to go into a natural, relaxing state, rhythmic state. And when I say breath work, I don't mean a lot of this buzzword power yoga or power breathing sort of stuff, because that actually jacks you up. You actually want to go into some form of calm breathing. So if you're looking for an example, I would say something like box breathing would be very helpful. So box breathing is just like a box. So 5 seconds inhale, 5-second hold, 5-second exhale, 5-second hold. And that would be a box. Now, if that's hard for you to start with 5 seconds, start with 3. But the key is every number needs to be the same to make that box. And that creates rhythm. And because you're creating rhythm relaxes the body, because stress is not regulated, but rhythm is regulated. So do that, and I would say maybe do 5 rounds of that without a break, and that helps to regulate the system. And when you regulate the system, the mind follows. Another thing that you can do is go for a walk. This takes longer. You may not be able to do it in 5 minutes, which is why I don't tend to recommend it for business leaders if they are in the output productivity part of their day, which is the action phase. Rebounding, because it pumps the body, it gets lymph moving, helps the blood move, increases circulation, feels good. So you may say, oh, I can't do rebounding. I'm just giving you options. You can buy one and leave it in your office. And if you're worried about how that looks, then go back to breath work. Stretching. Very good standing stretching is very good for the body, calms the nervous system. Stretching releases tension. So exercise. Just, very light exercise, move static energy from the body. Brilliant tip as well. So any of these sort of things, and then meditation. I wouldn't normally recommend meditation at work, because there's typically too many distractions and it normally takes too long to get into a meditative state. But the first 4 I gave you is more practical that you can use. And what will happen is your body will start creating that as a default mechanism. It will want to return you to that alpha brainwave state because the body always moves to the path of least resistance. And when you feel more relaxed, that's less resistance, and the brain starts to entrain that normality into the field. And just the same way how right now you've been addicted to output and buzz and wired and all of these sort of things, and that's become your norm because your body doesn't know any different. You've retrained the body to get into this calmer state, and it will always seek it. So my point here is, in spite of yourself, your body will always want you to get into that state, and you'll feel this urge every 2 hours or so as habits start to form in the neural systems to have a what I call quantum reset every 2 hours. And if you do that, you will find your productivity go up. You'll be in a far more regulated state, and you will realize that it's not about time and effort, it's about your state and energy production. So hopefully this makes sense. If you want to learn more and you want to go deeper, and you want to learn more about an energetic operating system, which is something that I teach business leaders, then there are guides and information. You can join my Substack, which is a great way to learn more because obviously there's a lot of articles that I put out which will help teach you specific practical tips that will allow you to go more into a productivity and rest recovery stage. And then from that, you can also join my Telegram group, which is a free group called Soul Aligned Leaders, and the links will be here. Other than that, please subscribe, help share this message. Each one, teach one. And remember, the helping hand you're looking for is at the end of your own arm. And so if you apply this information, you're helping yourself. And as I always say, if you want to be a leader, lead yourself first. If this has been helpful, please share, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love.